Story 1. Being a single mom isn't easy, especially when you're running your own business. After my divorce 3 years ago, I threw myself into building my marketing consultancy from the ground up. My 10-year-old son, who I'll call Alex, has been my rock through it all. He's mature beyond his years, quiet, well-mannered, and patient. He's had to grow up faster than other kids, watching me work late nights and early mornings to make our life stable. Last month, my biggest client finally signed a massive contract that would secure our financial future for years to come. To celebrate, I decided to splurge on first-class tickets for our trip to visit my parents in Sydney. We live in Los Angeles, so it's a 15-hour flight, the perfect excuse to treat ourselves to some comfort. I explained to Alex that this was a special occasion, and he needed to be on his best behavior in first class. He nodded seriously as I went through the rules. Speak quietly, stay in your seat unless going to the bathroom, use headphones when watching movies, and be respectful to everyone. He promised to follow every rule, excited about the fancy seats that could turn into beds. On the day of our flight, we arrived early at LAX. Alex clutched his backpack filled with books, his tablet, and his favorite stuffed lion that he still sleeps with, though he'd die of embarrassment if his friends knew. As we boarded the plane, the flight attendant greeted us warmly. "Flight attendant, welcome aboard. Let me show you to your seats." She led us to our spacious first-class pods, and Alex's eyes widened. "Me, remember what we talked about, buddy. This is a special treat, so we need to be extra well-behaved." "Alex, I know, Mom. I'll be super quiet and follow all the rules." We settled into our seats, which were in the middle section of the first-class cabin. Alex immediately buckled his seatbelt and started reading one of his books. I helped him organize his things in the storage compartments, making sure everything was within reach for the long flight ahead. About 20 minutes before takeoff, a woman in her 50s boarded and was directed to the seat across the aisle from us. She had bleached blonde hair styled in an obvious salon blowout, designer sunglasses perched on her head despite being inside the plane, and enough jewelry to set off metal detectors in 3 different countries. The moment she spotted Alex, her heavily made-up face twisted into a frown. She flagged down a flight attendant, immediately not the one who had helped us, but another one passing by with welcome drinks. "Woman, excuse me, there seems to be a mistake. There's a child in first class." The flight attendant looked confused. "Flight attendant, yes, ma'am. The young man and his mother have first-class tickets." "Woman, that can't be right. Children don't belong in first class. I paid a premium price for peace and quiet." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment as other first-class passengers turned to look at the commotion. Alex shrunk into his seat, his book clutched tightly in his hands. "Flight attendant, I assure you, ma'am, there's no age restriction for first class. Anyone with a valid first-class ticket is welcome here." "Woman, well, I want to speak to the lead flight attendant. This is unacceptable." The flight attendant nodded professionally despite the woman's rude tone and went to get her colleague. Meanwhile, the woman stared daggers at us. I gave Alex a reassuring smile. "Me, it's okay, buddy. Just keep reading your book." A few minutes later, the lead flight attendant, a woman in her 40s with a kind but firm expression, approached. "Lead flight attendant, good afternoon, ma'am. I understand you have concerns about seating arrangements." "Woman, yes, I paid over $8,000 for this ticket to have a peaceful, luxurious experience. Not to be seated near a child who will be disruptive the entire flight. Can't you move them to economy?" My blood was boiling, but I kept quiet, letting the flight attendant handle it. Alex hadn't made a sound since boarding. He was literally just sitting there reading. "Lead flight attendant, ma'am, this young man and his mother have paid for their first-class tickets just as you have. We cannot move them to economy when they've purchased first-class seats. I can assure you that all our passengers are expected to be courteous, regardless of age." "Woman, this is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? My husband is an executive at major airline, not the one we were flying. We fly first class all the time, and we never have to deal with children. Lead flight attendant, I understand your concern, but our policy is clear. Everyone with a first-class ticket is entitled to their seat. If you're uncomfortable, I can see if there's another first-class seat available, though we're quite full today. The woman huffed dramatically. Woman, fine, but if that child makes even the slightest noise, I'm filing a formal complaint. The lead flight attendant nodded and walked away. The woman aggressively stuffed her designer bag under the seat in front of her, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear. Woman, ridiculous. Standards have really gone downhill. In my day, parents knew better than to bring children to adult spaces. I leaned over to Alex, who looked on the verge of tears. Me, hey, you're doing great. Don't worry about her. Just enjoy your book, okay? Alex nodded silently, but I could see he was uncomfortable. He was trying so hard to be invisible, to not give the woman any reason to complain. It broke my heart. The flight took off without further incident. Alex watched a movie with his headphones on, and I tried to relax with a magazine. The woman across from us ordered multiple glasses of champagne before we even reached cruising altitude. About an hour into the flight, the meal service began. Alex whispered his order to the flight attendant, politely saying please and thank you. I was proud of his manners, especially under pressure. The woman across from us scoffed audibly at every interaction we had with the crew. Then, as Alex was quietly eating his meal, the woman suddenly stood up and marched to the front of the cabin where the flight attendants were preparing service for the remaining passengers. Woman, that child is kicking my seat. I demand something be done immediately. I was stunned. Alex was sitting perfectly still. His feet couldn't even reach the floor, let alone her seat across the aisle. The lead flight attendant returned with her. Lead flight attendant, ma'am, could you please point out the issue? Woman, that child has been kicking my seat constantly. It's intolerable. I haven't been able to relax for a single minute of this flight. I couldn't remain silent any longer. Me, that's completely untrue. My son hasn't moved from his seat except to use the bathroom once. His feet can't even reach your seat from where he's sitting. Woman, are you calling me a liar? I know when my seat is being kicked. Me, yes, actually, I am calling you a liar. My son has been sitting here reading and watching movies. He hasn't bothered anyone. The woman gasped dramatically. Woman, how dare you speak to me like that? I want to talk to the captain. This is harassment. Several other first-class passengers were now openly watching the scene unfold. To my surprise, an older gentleman a few rows ahead spoke up. Older gentleman, the boy hasn't moved. I've been watching him since you made that scene before takeoff. He's better behaved than most adults I know. Woman, mind your own business. This doesn't concern you. Another passenger, a businesswoman typing on her laptop, chimed in. Businesswoman, actually, you've made it everyone's business by disrupting the cabin repeatedly. The child has been perfectly quiet. The woman's face turned red with anger. Woman, I want the captain. Now, either that child goes to economy, or I'll make sure all of you regret this. The lead flight attendant maintained her composure admirably. Lead flight attendant, ma'am, please lower your voice. I'll speak with the captain, but I need you to return to your seat and calm down. Woman, I will not calm down. This is outrageous. At this point, Alex was fighting back tears. I put my arm around him and whispered that everything would be okay, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The lead flight attendant disappeared into the cockpit. When she returned, she was accompanied by the co-pilot. Co-pilot, ma'am, I understand there's a disturbance. What seems to be the problem? The woman launched into her fabricated story again, now claiming that not only was Alex kicking her seat, but that he had been running up and down the aisles and that I had been allowing it. Me, that's absolutely false. My son hasn't left his seat except once to use the bathroom. Ask any of the other passengers or check the cabin footage if you don't believe me. Woman, cabin footage. What are you talking about? Co-pilot, ma'am, for security purposes, we do have cameras monitoring the cabin. If there's a serious disturbance being reported, we can review that footage. The woman's expression changed slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Woman? Well, maybe he wasn't running in the aisles, but he was definitely kicking my seat. I demand that they be moved to economy where children belong. Co-pilot, ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time to lower your voice and return to your seat. If you continue to disrupt the cabin, we'll have to take further action. Woman, what does that mean? Are you threatening me? Do you know who my husband is? The co-pilot remained professional but firm. Co-pilot, it means that disruptive passengers who pose a threat to the comfort and safety of others may be removed from the flight. This is your final warning. Woman, this is discrimination. I'm being discriminated against because I expect a certain standard when I pay for first class. She stormed back to her seat, glaring at me and Alex. I mouthed thank you to the co-pilot, who gave a subtle nod before returning to the cockpit. For the next 30 minutes, the woman alternated between aggressively typing on her phone and shooting dirty looks our way. Alex had given up on enjoying the flight and was just staring at his tablet screen, not really watching anything. Then, without warning, the woman unbuckled her seatbelt and marched to the galley again. This time, her voice was loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Woman, I've had enough. That woman and her brat have ruined my entire flight. I've just texted my husband, and he's contacting your CEO directly. Either they go, or I'm going to make sure all of you lose your jobs. The lead flight attendant stepped out of the galley with her phone in hand. Lead flight attendant, ma'am, I've just reviewed the cabin footage from the past 2 hours. At no point did this child kick your seat, run in the aisles, or cause any disturbance. You, however, have disrupted this cabin multiple times despite several warnings. Woman, you're lying. Let me see that footage. Lead flight attendant, that won't be possible. But what is going to happen now is that I'm calling the air marshal. The woman's face drained of color. Woman, the air marshal? For what? This is ridiculous. Within minutes, a plainclothes air marshal who had been seated in economy came forward. He spoke quietly with the lead flight attendant, who showed him something on her phone, presumably the cabin footage. Air Marshal, ma'am, I need you to gather your belongings and come with me. Woman, what? You can't be serious. I'm the victim here. Air Marshal, based on the evidence and multiple witness accounts, you've been creating a disturbance and making false accusations against other passengers. We're returning to the gate, and you'll be escorted off the plane. Woman, you can't do this to me. I paid for this ticket. Lead flight attendant, your ticket will not be refunded as this removal is due to your behavior, which violates our terms of service. The reality of the situation finally seemed to sink in. The woman looked around the cabin, perhaps expecting someone to come to her defense, but was met with either satisfied smirks or people deliberately avoiding eye contact. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Captain, ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the interruption to your journey. We're returning to the gate briefly to resolve a passenger issue. We'll be on our way again shortly. As the plane taxied back to the gate, the woman sat in stunned silence. When we arrived, 2 airport security officers boarded and escorted her off the plane. She went surprisingly quietly, perhaps finally realizing the gravity of her actions. Once she was gone, a spontaneous round of applause broke out in the first-class cabin. The lead flight attendant approached our seats. Lead flight attendant, I am so sorry you had to experience that. Both of you handled yourselves with tremendous grace. Is there anything we can do to make the rest of your journey more comfortable? Alex, speaking for the first time in hours, looked up at her. Alex, can I have another hot chocolate? The flight attendant laughed warmly. Flight attendant, you can have as many as you want, young man. The rest of our 15-hour flight was blissfully uneventful. The empty seat across from us remained unoccupied, a perfect reminder that sometimes karma works in beautiful ways. When we finally landed in Sydney, Several passengers stopped by our seats to compliment Alex on his behavior and to express their support. The older gentleman who had spoken up earlier shook my hand. "Older gentleman, your son is a credit to you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong somewhere." As we disembarked, the entire flight crew thanked us again. The lead flight attendant quietly informed me that the woman had been placed on the airline's no-fly list for making false accusations and creating a disturbance. Alex and I spent 3 wonderful weeks with my parents in Australia. On our return flight, also in first class, because why not? There were no entitled passengers, just a lovely crew and the luxury experience I had originally hoped to share with my son. As for the woman, I sometimes wonder if she learned anything from the experience. Somehow, I doubt it. People like that rarely do. But I did learn something important. Never let anyone make you or your children feel less than worthy of taking up space, whether it's in first class or anywhere else in the world. Story 2. I never thought I'd have a story worthy of posting online, but after what happened last Tuesday at Super Safe Grocery, I just have to share. I'm a single mom with 2 kids, and grocery shopping is basically an Olympic event for me. I plan everything meticulously because my budget is tight. Every week, I spend hours making meal plans, clipping coupons, and checking store flyers for deals. It's not just about saving money, it's about survival. Last Tuesday was my only day off that week. I had dropped my kids at my mother's place so I could get the shopping done without any distractions. Super Save was having their monthly sale, and I had been waiting for this day to stock up on essentials. I arrived at 10 a.m. and grabbed a cart. I had my shopping list organized by store sections to make everything more efficient. I started in the produce section, carefully selecting fruits and vegetables that were both affordable and would last the week. I checked each apple for bruises and picked through the lettuce to find the freshest head. As I moved through the aisles, my cart slowly filled with everything we would need: pasta, rice, canned beans, cereals for the kids, bread, milk, eggs, and some chicken that was on special. I even allowed myself to grab a small box of cookies as a treat for the kids. They were on sale, and sometimes you need a little something to look forward to. By 11:15 a.m., my cart was almost full. I had been checking prices, comparing brands, and making sure I stuck to my budget. I was in the last aisle, the one with baking supplies, when I realized I had forgotten to grab flour. It was on my list, but somehow I had missed it. I turned away from my cart just for a moment, stepping about 5 feet away to grab the flour from the shelf. That's when it happened. As I turned back, flour in hand, I saw a woman mid-40s, bobbed blonde hair with chunky highlights, wearing a bright pink tracksuit, pushing my cart away toward the checkout lanes. At first, I thought she had mistaken my cart for hers, which would have been an honest mistake. I called out to her. Excuse me, that's my cart." She pretended not to hear me, walking faster. I put the flour back on the shelf and hurried after her. Ma'am, that's my cart you're taking." She stopped and turned around with this annoyed expression, like I was inconveniencing her. She looked at me with narrowed eyes. "Woman, excuse me. This is my cart. I've been shopping for the past hour." I was stunned. I looked in the cart and saw all my carefully selected items, my specific brand of pasta, the chicken I had picked out, even the box of cookies for my kids. Those are all my groceries. I just stepped away to grab flour. "Look, that's even my purse hanging on the handle." I pointed to my small crossbody bag that I had hung on the cart handle. The woman glanced at it, and without missing a beat, she unhooked it and held it out to me. "Woman, oh, you must have left this on my cart by mistake. Here you go." I couldn't believe what was happening. Was I going crazy? Those are all the items I picked out. That's my cart." The woman's face hardened, and she leaned in close, lowering her voice. "Woman, listen, I don't know what your problem is, but this is my cart. Maybe you're confused, or maybe you need help. Did you forget to take medication today?" That's when I realized what she was doing. She was trying to make me doubt myself, trying to make me think I was the one who was confused or mistaken. Me, I'm not confused. That is my cart with all my groceries that I spent over an hour selecting. You're trying to steal my cart. By this point, we were causing a scene. Other shoppers had stopped to watch the drama unfold. The woman sensed this and changed her tactics. Woman, speaking loudly, I'm sorry, but you seem very confused. I've been shopping all morning. Maybe you should talk to someone at customer service. They might be able to help you find your cart. She was playing it up for the audience now, making herself sound concerned while painting me as mentally unstable. I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Me, we can easily settle this. Let's get a manager involved. The woman's face flickered with something worried. Maybe? But she quickly composed herself. Woman, fine. If that will help you understand that this is my cart, let's do that. I flagged down an employee, a young man who looked like he was still in high school. Me, excuse me, this woman is trying to take my shopping cart that I've been filling for the past hour. Woman, that's ridiculous. This is my cart. She's confused. The young employee looked uncomfortable, caught between two adults in a weird dispute. Employee, let me get my manager. He scurried off, and the woman and I stood there in tense silence. She kept one hand firmly on the cart, as if claiming ownership. I noticed a few items on top that I hadn't seen before: a magazine and a box of fancy tea. She must have tossed them in after taking my cart. A few minutes later, the employee returned with an older man wearing a name tag that said "Store Manager" on it. Manager, what seems to be the problem here, ladies? I explained my side first, detailing how I had been shopping for over an hour, turned away briefly to grab flour, and turned back to find this woman making off with my cart. The woman interrupted me halfway through. Woman, that's completely untrue. This is my cart. I've been shopping all morning. She's either confused or, well, I don't want to be unkind, but maybe she needs help. I'm concerned, actually. The way she said it with this fake concern in her voice made my blood boil. Manager, ma'am, can you tell me what items you put in your cart today? I thought this was smart. I listed off several specific items, including the brand of pasta I had chosen, the specific package of chicken thighs on sale, and the box of cookies I had picked for my kids. The woman seemed flustered for a moment but recovered quickly. Woman, well, I have those items too. It's a grocery store, lots of people buy the same things. The manager looked thoughtful for a moment. Manager, we have security cameras throughout the store. If you're both willing to wait, we can review the footage and clear this up. My heart leapt. Yes, security cameras would prove I was telling the truth. Woman, this is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. I need to get home. Manager, it won't take long, ma'am. Let me just have someone watch the cart while we sort this out. He called over another employee to stand with the cart, and we all walked to a small office in the back of the store. The woman was getting visibly nervous, but she was committed to her lie at this point. In the office, the manager sat at a computer and started rewinding footage. He asked me where I had started shopping, and I told him the produce section around 10 a.m. He found footage of me entering the store and then started following my path through the aisles. Sure enough, there I was, carefully selecting items and placing them in my cart. The manager fast-forwarded, and we could see me shopping for the entire hour, filling my cart with exactly the items that were now in the disputed cart. Then came the moment where I stepped away to grab the flour, and there, clear as day, the woman in the pink tracksuit swooped in, abandoned her own cart in the middle of the aisle, and started pushing mine toward checkout. The manager turned to the woman, whose face had gone pale. Manager, ma'am, it appears this is not your cart. Woman, the cameras must be wrong. That's not what happened. Manager, we can see you leaving your own cart behind and taking hers. In fact, let me check something else. He typed something and pulled up a different camera angle, showing the produce section. There was an abandoned cart with several items in it, just sitting there. Manager, is that your original cart, ma'am? The woman's face had gone from pale to bright red. She was caught, and she knew it. Woman, I thought it was my cart. It was an honest mistake. Manager, an honest mistake would have been admitting the error when this customer first approached you. Instead, you tried to convince her she was confused or mentally unwell. That's not acceptable behavior in our store. I felt vindicated, but also shaken by the whole experience. The manager turned to me. Manager, I'm very sorry this happened. Please, finish your shopping, and we'll give you 20% off your total bill today for the inconvenience. I thanked him and was about to leave when one of the other employees who had been watching the footage spoke up. Employee, sir, this isn't the first time she's done this. The manager looked surprised. Manager, what do you mean? Employee, remember last month when that elderly gentleman reported his cart missing? I bet if we checked the footage from then. The manager looked back at the woman, who now seemed to be trying to make herself as small as possible. Manager, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're no longer welcome to shop at this store. Woman, you can't ban me. I spend thousands of dollars here every year. Manager, actually, we can. Attempting to steal from another customer and then lying about it is grounds for permanent removal from the premises. If you return, we'll consider it trespassing and contact the police. The woman stormed out, muttering under her breath about lawsuits and how she was friends with the store owner. The manager just shook his head. He walked me back out to my cart, which was right where we had left it with the employee watching over it. Manager, again, I'm so sorry this happened. Some people just feel entitled to take whatever they want. Please, finish your shopping, and don't forget to get your discount at checkout. I thanked him and went back to the baking aisle to finally get my flour. As I finished shopping, several other customers who had witnessed the confrontation came up to me to express their support. One older woman even patted my arm and said, "Good for you for standing your ground, dear." When I checked out, the cashier had already been informed about the incident and applied the discount without me having to mention it. My final bill was $32 less than it would have been, which was actually a significant savings for me. As I loaded my groceries into my car, I couldn't help but think about how differently this could have gone. What if there hadn't been security cameras? What if the manager hadn't been willing to check the footage? Would that woman have gotten away with it, walking out with all the groceries I had carefully selected while staying within my tight budget? It was frightening to think about, but also empowering to know that I had stood up for myself and that justice had prevailed. And to top it all off, the store employees told me they found several unpaid items in the bottom of the woman's abandoned cart. She had been shoplifting as well. I drove home feeling a strange mix of emotions: anger at the entitlement of some people, gratitude for the store employees who had taken me seriously, and a newfound confidence in my ability to stand up for myself when needed. And yes, my kids did enjoy those cookies I bought them. They tasted even sweeter knowing they hadn't been stolen by the cart thief in the pink tracksuit. Story 3. Working at Sunshine Diner wasn't glamorous, but it paid my bills while I finished my degree in graphic design. The early morning shifts were brutal, especially after late nights hunched over projects, but the regular customers made it worthwhile. Most of them anyway. I'd been working there for almost 2 years. The owner, a gruff but fair man in his 60s, had taken a chance on me when I desperately needed work after my mom got sick. The medical bills had piled up fast, and my scholarship only covered tuition. Between classes, hospital visits, and the diner, I barely had time to breathe, but I was managing. That particular Saturday was chaos. We were short-staffed because my coworker had called in sick, and it seemed like everyone in town had decided they wanted pancakes at exactly the same time. I'd been running non-stop for 5 hours, my feet aching and my smile growing more forced by the minute. Table 12 was my saving grace that day. An older gentleman in a worn blue cap who ordered the simplest breakfast on the menu: eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee. He didn't complain when his food took longer than it should have. Instead, he just smiled and thanked me when I finally brought it out, apologizing for the wait. Me. I'm really sorry about the delay, sir. We're a bit understaffed today. Blue Cap. No worries at all, young man. I can see you're working hard. Take your time. He ate quietly, reading a paperback book and occasionally glancing up to watch the morning news on the small TV mounted in the corner. When he finished, I brought his check. Blue Cap, that was just what I needed. Thank you for your service today. Me, happy to help. Hope you have a great day. I started to turn away when he called me back. Blue Cap, hang on a second. I know what it's like working these jobs. My first position was at a place not unlike this one. He pulled out his wallet and placed his payment on the check tray, then very deliberately added a $50 bill on top. Blue Cap, you're doing a good job. Keep it up. I stared at the tip, momentarily stunned. $50 was more than I'd make in the next 4 hours. Me, sir, that's incredibly generous. Are you sure? Blue Cap, absolutely. Pay it forward someday when you can. I thanked him profusely, my genuine smile returning for the first time that day. This would help with my mom's prescription refill that I'd been worried about affording. That's when I heard her voice from 2 tables over. Karen, excuse me. Waiter, hello. I turned to see a woman in her 40s with an expensive-looking purse and the kind of highlighted hair that screams, "I want to speak to your manager," waving impatiently. She'd come in about 20 minutes after Blue Cap and had already sent back her omelet once because it wasn't fluffy enough. I tucked the 50 into my apron pocket and approached her table. Me, yes, ma'am. Is there something else you need? Karen, I just saw what happened. That man gave you $50. Her tone made it sound like an accusation rather than a question. I shifted uncomfortably. Me, yes, he was very generous. Karen, well, that's just ridiculous. Nobody tips that much for eggs and coffee. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I just stood there, waiting to see if she actually needed something. Karen, listen, I'm running really low on gas, and I need to get across town for an appointment. You should share some of that with me. I blinked, certain I'd misheard her. Me, I'm sorry? Karen, that $50. You didn't earn that. It was just luck that you got his table instead of someone else. I need some gas money, so you should give me at least half. The audacity was so shocking that I actually laughed, thinking it must be a joke. Her face immediately turned red. Me, I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's my tip. I've been working since 5 a.m. Karen, don't be selfish. You make hourly wages too. I have an important meeting, and my gas light just came on. $25 would solve my problem. Me, again, I'm sorry about your situation, but I can't give you my tip money. I started to turn away, thinking that would be the end of it. I was wrong. What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to react. As I turned, I felt a sharp tug on my apron. When I looked down, I saw her hand withdrawing from my pocket, the $50 bill clutched between her manicured fingers. Me, hey, what are you doing? Karen, you're being unreasonable, I asked nicely. She was already stuffing the money into her purse. A few customers at nearby tables were staring now, their forks suspended halfway to their mouths. Me, give that back right now or I'm getting the manager. Karen, go ahead. Tipping isn't even mandatory, you know? You should be grateful for your hourly wage instead of hoarding excessive tips. I couldn't believe what was happening. I hurried to the back office where the manager was doing paperwork. Me, I need your help out front. A customer just took my tip money out of my pocket. The manager, a no-nonsense woman who'd worked her way up from waitressing, stood immediately. Manager, she did what now? We returned to the dining area where the woman was now standing, apparently preparing to leave. The manager stepped in front of her. Manager, ma'am, I understand there's been an issue. My employee says you took money from him. Karen, he's exaggerating. We were just discussing sharing a ridiculously large tip he received. He's being selfish when I explained my emergency. Manager, regardless of your emergency, taking money from our staff is completely unacceptable. I need you to return the $50 immediately." Karen's voice rose to a volume that ensured everyone in the diner could hear. "Karen, this is outrageous. He didn't earn that $50. That old man was obviously confused or showing off, and I need it." Several customers were openly watching now, some with phones discreetly pointed in our direction. "Manager, ma'am, return the money now, or I'll have to call the police." "Karen, call them. They'll agree with me. Tipping isn't mandatory." The manager nodded at me, and I pulled out my phone to make the call. Karen seemed to think this was a bluff because her smug expression didn't falter. "Karen, go ahead, call them. Waste police resources over a tip that wasn't even yours to begin with." So I did. While we waited for the police to arrive, the manager instructed Karen to remain in the restaurant. She refused to return to her table, instead standing near the door with her arms crossed, occasionally shouting justifications to no one in particular. "Karen, he should be sharing with all the other servers anyway. It's not fair that he got the generous customer. I have a real job that I'm going to be late for now because of this ridiculous situation." By the time two officers arrived about 10 minutes later, the diner had become uncomfortably quiet except for Karen's periodic outbursts. The manager explained the situation, and I gave my account of what happened. Then one of the officers turned to Karen. "Officer 1, ma'am, did you take money from this young man?" "Karen, I didn't take anything. We were discussing sharing an excessive tip he received when I'm clearly in need." "Officer 1, did you physically remove money from his person?" "Karen, he wasn't being reasonable. I explained my situation." "Officer 2, that's not what we asked, ma'am. Did you take the money from him without his permission?" Her face was flushed now, eyes darting around the diner as if looking for someone to support her. "Karen, it's just a tip. It's extra money. He still gets paid hourly." "Officer 1, ma'am, taking money that doesn't belong to you is theft, regardless of whether it was a tip or not. I need you to return the money now." "Karen, this is absurd. I'm a taxpayer. I pay your salary." "Officer 2, ma'am, please hand over the money and we can resolve this situation." "Karen, fine. Take the stupid money. It's not worth all this drama." She dug into her purse and threw the $50 bill on the floor. "Karen, there. Happy now? Over a stupid tip." "Officer 1, I need you to step outside with me, please." "Karen, why? I returned it. This is ridiculous." "Officer 1, you committed theft." "Ma'am, we need to discuss this further." "Karen, theft? It was just sitting on a table. It wasn't even in a wallet or anything." "Officer 2, actually, according to multiple witnesses, you removed it directly from his apron pocket without permission. That's petty theft." "Karen, this is insane. Don't you have real criminals to catch?" Despite her protests, the officers escorted her outside. Through the window, we could see her gesticulating wildly as the officers spoke with her. When one of them took out handcuffs, her eyes went wide with shock. I could hear her shriek even through the glass, "You're arresting me over a tip." The entire diner watched as she was handcuffed and placed in the back of the police car, her face a picture of indignant disbelief the entire time. The manager picked up the $50 from the floor and handed it back to me. "Manager, put this somewhere safer, and take your break now, you've earned it." As I sat in the back room, drinking a cup of coffee with shaking hands, one of the regular customers popped his head in. "Regular, hey, just wanted to say, we all saw what happened. That lady was nuts. We've got your back. A bunch of us are leaving statements with the other officer." "Me, thanks. I really appreciate that." "Regular, no problem. Oh, and I added a little extra to my tip today. Not $50. Mind you, I'm not made of money, but we gotta look out for each other, right?" After my shift ended, the manager told me that several customers had left larger tips than usual, with notes of support on their receipts. The blue-capped gentleman's generosity had sparked a chain reaction, even if it came with an unexpected drama in the middle. I later found out that Karen was charged with petty theft. According to one of the regulars who worked at the courthouse, she tried to argue that tips are public domain once they're left on the table and that I had monopolized the good tippers. The judge was apparently not amused. As for me, I used that $50 and the extra tips from that day to help pay for my mom's medication. And every time I see someone leave a generous tip now, I make sure it goes straight into my wallet, and I keep a closer eye on the surrounding tables.